make, which will create a national level impact if that happens. A very, very valuable comment.
I'll try to speak loud. There were two aspects to this. One was, since there's a planning commission member also, one was why don't we have certain mobile phones at a certain price point and having certain features which help for a social cause, make it as an essential commodity. So obviously that means that the taxes, etc., which is levied by the government are removed and it becomes more affordable. So that's one aspect in terms of owning the terminal. The second one was, after hearing Priyanka speak about the challenges she faced when she was structuring these with various ecosystem partners there in terms of tariffs and revenue share. And there's something called a USO fund, which is a universal service obligation fund which all operators have to give back to the government. And it's a lot of corpus out there. For initiatives such as this, it should be made available to NGOs, basis whatever merit there. So that sort of helps you in your sustenance, at least in terms of infrastructure costs. So these were some of the points which did come up. One was making it an essential commodity, certain phones with certain criteria out there, and of course the usage of USO funds. And maybe I'd request DEF and UNICEF also to put forward such a case when they're developing the white paper of it, and maybe start raising the noise now. Or a point in time might become a policy at some point in time.
One of the things that is culturally going to create a huge impact is the National Optic Fiber Network. If it really gets successful, that's a big question that telcos are putting up, because telcos are really not getting interested into why government is putting up a National Optic Fiber Network which is taking 100 Mbps line up to the panchayat, and I have not heard even a single telco taking interest into that one. And even I talked to the CEO of Vodafone also, and he was saying, why are they spending so much our money, which is we have given to them, because USO fund is made from the taxes that is paid by the telcos. And for some reason or other, the telcos are not taking interest. But culturally, I am saying, if 100 Mbps is going up to the panchayat level, that means even if you divide into each household, it becomes almost 264 kbps or 128 kbps, which is not a bad line to have in each house. If you divide just per house, the 100 Mbps, but that's not the way it is going to work. I mean, maybe the block itself will take half the thing, but culturally, because when we are talking about social and behavioral change and all that, it's very strong with the culture, For example, if somebody has a mobile, that doesn't mean that he's culturally enabled with mobile, the fastness of the mobile or things like that. For example, I mean, we get up and use mobile, before sleep we use mobile, we keep checking email. So that habitual change takes a lot of time. But that connectivity, broadband, if it comes to the household, that may create a culture of connectedness, and that certainly is going to make an impact on the usage of mobile indirectly, because even today the mobile culturally is not adopted. It is adopted as a possibility, I would say, that will bring in change in the next 5 years or 10 years. So from that perspective, if NOFN is an USO fund project and get a subsidy or a special line of connectivity to the NGOs who can work at a grassroots level, I think is a very, very brilliant idea from the cultural change perspective, and adaptation perspective. Anybody, Arjun?
As I understand, NOFN is currently being used primarily for video conferencing between district centers. And every time I've tried to figure out how to get on the NOFN, I've usually met a blank wall. So if there is any way that anyone can share, which is to figure out a way to do some bandwidth sharing on the NOFN in the short term, then that would be something I'd be very interested to find out.
Just a second. Your points are very well taken. I think in terms of creating a special category for, let us say, devices which might be used to create greater connectivity or greater mobile, for development access, excellent. But I would draw a parallel with something we have been facing in the community media sector, which is a core focus area for me, where we've been trying for quite some time to convince the INB ministry and the finance ministry to, let us say, remove levies on community radio related equipment in order to create easier access, because it's still expensive equipment. So it's been an uphill task. Despite the fact that the community radio policy is couched in development speak and is meant for development, it's very hard to convince them on a why should we do this level. Because it's just not large enough to register on their radar for them to want to do it at that level. It's an uphill task, but it's likely to be a similar uphill task for such a thing as well. Not undoable. Possibly industry bodies play a very large portion in that, and perhaps the Association of Mobile and Internet Operators can play a part in this significantly, but it's an uphill task.
Rajan, I wanted to, you to share one thing is intervention and decision-making process and involving the community. You know, like Mr. Emi Khan said at that time that I don't know about mobile, but you know, I can highlight about the social and behavioral change, and many of those changes cannot take place or cannot be considered that just because having a mobile will make it happen. So you have been instrumental in creating this new organization called Open Knowledge Community. Can you highlight that? Can that add value in terms of taking bottom-up consideration?
It could be a possibility. I'm not saying it will be the possibility, but just to give you a kind of feedback, many of my friends here have been on what used to be the Solution Exchange ICTD community. And for various reasons it has been put on hold for a couple of years, 3 years now, and a lot of and of course UNESCO used to be heading these the education and ICTD community, and we did a lot of things. And I think yesterday somebody said, why don't we learn from the failures? And I think this is one of those very intense evaluation of what the whole two communities did. And then, you know, strangely, even after shutting down these two communities, and I have moved on to do other things, I have been constantly been badgered in various workshops, emails I still get, and saying that why don't you restart this community? And I'm very glad to inform you that it has been now in the process, it has been registered and it's now going to be in a new avatar, and it's called the Open Knowledge Community. UNESCO has agreed to put all its repositories on the open domain. The community is owned by the community and not by the UN or the government. The government and UNESCO are partners facilitating this. So I think there's a huge difference in the way we have done it now. It's a bottom-up approach. It's a hub and spoke model. We are reaching right down into the grassroots and collating information from there. Also looking at the elitist lot like us who are there on that community at that time to see how do we actually work together in real time. So I think that is one way of looking at it. And I'm linking it up to NOFN, which I have been also been on the ground in some of the locations where it's actually being used. There's a huge possibility of linking that up to knowledge capturing from the ground and giving it back to them at the ground. So I think the open knowledge community, I would ask you all to come and partner with us and see how we can take it forward together. Thank you, Usman.
That there is a huge amount of literacy also required in terms of the possibility of mobile itself. Mobile has a huge amount of possibilities, so that doesn't mean that you have mobile that you know all the functionality of mobile, like the way we don't know all the functionality of a remote of a TV also. You know, many a times we are doing like this and asking our son or daughter that how do you swap between 3 channels, you know, so quickly, and we are just or remember those numbers or whatever. So that kind of thing, I mean, like yesterday I was sharing with you that in Varanasi people use it as a slate, you know, as literacy. So I was wondering that how much perhaps we also have to take back in terms of the literacy of mobile among those women and children and users at that level, where we are thinking of working with them and where all the interventions are going back. Even from your intervention, it is very clear that there is so much of possibility that can be thought about. So that is one area that in most of the cases, I'm sure they spend a lot of time in first capacity building also in terms of mobile usage of the mobile application. Rita is trying to,
My point is kind of past, but I just wanted to mention on the NOFIN, there is this Beyond the Fiber part of the NOFIN project where they're equipping certain institutions in those locations, police stations, the panchayats, the public health centers, and just on the point of partnering with NGOs, it seems like those are also partnership opportunities. where they also need some capacity building in terms of using that technology and using that bandwidth, but also that the NGOs that are locally there can be working with them. But I think on the point of literacy, Osama, I mean, we've been working on the digital literacy project, and I think the vision in that is that it's not about computer literacy, but it's digital. And the mobile has been the example everyone has used, but we're yet to get a mobile player onto our mission to actually kind of represent that aspect. So I think that would be something great, that if you could help us with getting a mobile player onto that collaboration.
Sure. So that we will note down, yeah. That's a good point. She's asking that I think the kind of thing that Nadesh pointed out.
Sure. USO fund. Sure.
Because the reason I'm saying is that we are, DEF is one of the closest partner of USO funds for digital literacy for this NOFIN. And to tell you the experience is that they never signed even a single paper, and I am in each and every meeting. They said on call, on email to Railtel and PowerGrid and BSNL that DF is our partner, please, when they are setting up this digital center, which is our digital center kind of thing. When I say, why don't you sign a piece of paper? Because that Babu who comes from BSNL to put that line for my digital literacy center, he wants to see paper so that he gives free of cost. And they just didn't sign even till the time. And additional secretary and the head, he knows me personally. I am an advisor to the NOFIN, and that paper is not signed. So these are the small, not small but big issue, I would say. And there was a rule that 3 months we will give free of cost for literacy to check out how does it work at a grassroots level. And 3 months lapsed. He said, now you have to take it, buy it. And there is not a single other buyer, by the way. There is not a single other buyer to buy even a single Mbps from that national optic fiber line which is breaking into Panchayat Ghar. Not even a single person. So what I'm saying this, again the culture, the entire cultural, establishment culture is like very, very traditional and different.
I want to explain this.
Priyanka.
See, it's not a cultural issue. I think it's linked to the way the Government of India and the Department of Telecom functions. The functionality of NOFN, as we know, is to take the lines up to the Gram Panchayat, and from there on, they have only empowered the licensed service providers to get the connectivity there. Now, connectivity or provision of connectivity or by using telecom resources is only to be done under a license. So if you have a license as an ISP or a telecom service provider, that is when you can do that work. What partners like DF are supposed to do is basically build a computer center, provide digital literacy equipment, okay, provide content, applications, aggregate all that. So that's something which is beyond the purview of licensing. So there's a clear segregation. So I'm just saying this so we know where we stand. So if you take it up at the policy level, yes, it's worth taking up at the policy level because going by the past, USO fund did not even allow internet as a part of the scope of activities for USO. It was only meant for providing telephones. And for many, many years, the ISP industry fought a battle with USO to allow them to provide internet services using USO fund, which were lying unutilized for many, many years. It's only lately that they did that, right? So once you know this background, it will probably help you to put across a proposal which will make sense to them to accept. Like you said, there's no single buyer. So tell them you are wasting 20,000 crores, and most of the telcos are not interested because they don't see return on investment. Right? And because of that reason, you need to allow other entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs to do the work that others don't do for economic reasons. The other development is that I heard, I think it's official now, that cable operators would be allowed. Now, they're not licensed ISPs, but they're cable operators, so you pay, what, $50 at a post office and become a cable operator? Something like that. Now, if they're going to be allowed, that's a better step forward that they've taken. So maybe in the same vein, push across this policy proposal, I would say. So worth doing that. Document is because you are not a licensed operator, so they can't sign on paper.
No, I have two things to share. One is on the topic itself. If we go back to the topic, mobile for social and behavioral change. And in last 2 days, we have seen many possible uses of it as a tool, mobile as a tool for social and behavioral change. Information dissemination, capacity building, training, many things we saw. Also IPC, dialogue, complaint redressal system, and so on and so forth. But each in isolation won't lead to social and behavioral change. I mean, that would go as a part of our paper when we finalize it. Mobile as a tool will not address the issue of social and behavioral change. So it has to be complemented with many other things, and that brings us to the point that it would be effective in areas wherein other things are happening. Other components of social and behavioral change are happening. Social mobilization is happening. Grassroots functionaries are being trained. So that's point number one, and this has to be taken somewhere. And when we finalize the paper, white paper or whatever paper we say later on, we should clearly, out of this workshop, we should be able to articulate that what are the areas wherein it has effectively worked based on whatever experiences we have from the partners. Say for example, information dissemination, yes, it has worked. To what extent it has worked? Do we have rigor and evidences? That brings me to the second point, which is many of the initiatives which we saw was good, but when it came to results, we talked about, yes, there are anecdotal incidences. So that has to be converted into some kind of rigor and evidences which can be shared and presented. And then, so that's on mobile for social and behavioral change. The other thing which I found very complex in these 2 days is there are a lot of partners involved. There are mobile companies, there are providers, there are content developers, there are software developers, there are NGOs who are implementing it in field. So in order to move forward, a similar kind of workshop might be very fruitful when you do it at a state level, wherein the government knows what is the priority. We have local NGOs and we know where do they work, where are they working very well. And if we want to take it to a scale based on the experiences which we have gathered from this workshop, standardize it to some extent so that it's not that anybody is putting, so you have 10 different kind of messages going to the same set of population, which actually creates confusion and is hindrance to behavioral and social change rather than facilitation. Right?
Okay, you never know, we might as well end up calling it role of mobile in social and behavioral change rather than saying mobile for social and behavioral change. You never know. So let's see if how we do it, Rachna.
Yeah, Osama, you almost said what I was thinking, because maybe out of this consultation, what also emerges is that perhaps we are pitching mobile phones at a very high level. Mobiles for social and behavior change, and somebody can come back and challenge. So if you look at the stages of change theory, then I guess it's the first 2 stages where you have the knowledge and then you intend to do something. That's the level at which mobile as a communication tool comes in. So perhaps in the white paper we need to lower the pitch a bit and have a different take, then just go full hog and say mobiles for social and behavior change.
I think the white paper will become grey by that time. Yeah.
I'd just like to add 2 things. One is, if we really want to make a dent, then probably we should catch them young. So, because a lot of current mothers, mother-in-laws, men are finding, the technology itself difficult to maneuver and use to their benefit. So one strategy could be is we catch them young. So look at adolescents as our target group. And I say this not only for the technology per se, but even for health messages, for example. Your health is going even lower. So now the government is talking about, reaching out to the adolescents and then taking it from there. It might seem that, we are missing out on a large chunk of mothers and newborns and things like that. But the investment that we make today in the adolescents will probably pay off twice as much going forward. So that's one suggestion.
Yeah, one of the things that I think at the lunchtime we were talking, Alka and we were talking about that the reason why mobile is being considered to looked upon is that this is the first time, other than the press, has something become a mass media, which is a device and mobile. So if it is a mass media which is in the hands of the people, it's necessary to look at that if it's something as interactive, as multiple functionality based, if it is in the hands of the people, and then how do we really reach out to them? That's number one, of course, and how they have been behaving with the tool so far. These are the two, I think, is the main, if we very broadly divide, those who have it, how are they using it? And the second is that since it is already in their hand, how we can reach out to them. It's I think broadly this is the division. Correct. And this is the first time this has reached to that kind of, there is no other device that reaches so many people.
And just one more is many times content creators think that you just take the content and load it onto a mobile, but I think we also need to think about instructional design and how people interact with a format, and usability, because it's a device. So some kind of research can go into that will also be great.
So that's a very good point, that also need to look at about the functionality research going into the usability and what you call is in one word instructional design of the content, and that goes across the medium, voice or video or text, anything. Yeah.
I think they are very actively looking at user interfaces. I think they are very actively looking at, right, but we don't get to hear enough about it outside the handset maker industry, because it's the people working in the development communication area who need to understand exactly what that thought process is. If you do that and you can bridge that gap, I think we have a very good partnership going here.
In fact, I mean, a lot of our work is dependent on, so a lot of our work is heavily user tested as opposed to pre-tested. It's both pre-tested and user tested, and it really looks at usability design. So if you're talking about even using something as simple and as tried and tested as an IVR, and you're using it with rural Bihari women, we have no idea whether they're able to navigate an IVR or not. So we've done an enormous amount of work in the last 18 months to actually understand usability of simple basic technology.
All the presenters, the 12 presenters, and also another 10 presenters today in the afternoon, like Nokia and Vodafone and many other. Can all of you separately, with everything that you have experienced because of your user level, because of your customer base, you have your own analysis of how the citizens have adopted it, how many things which shows the change in culture, change in behavior, change in adaptation, change in content usage, change in everything. I mean, you have this data. And with all due respect to your privacy of the data or the confidentiality of the data, whatever you want, but at least that will contribute, because that's the number that you have, nobody has, And they are not collated because the TRAI doesn't want you to share those data. TRAI only wants you to share the numbers, in the sense how many people have bought SIM. But the other number, like Vodafone was sharing that they have 1.1 million point of sale of their chips and the SIM and everything. That's a huge number of just sheer accessibility, of physical accessibility of the place. That itself is a huge contribution in terms of partnership. Many things that can be thought about, that how your outlet can be utilized for creating just a meeting point or a distribution point or a content distribution point, or that what you are talking about, SD distribution. mini SD card which goes into each mobile, your point of sale can be a distribution point, you know. Similarly, Nokia has, I was looking at your numbers that you were showing in the last slides of graphs and all that, all the projects that you have implemented, they have given you a lot of data in terms of over a period of time. And since I would say in the mass level, Nokia is more used than in the cities, you know, so, and they're still being used because of being cheap phone, because of being long lasting, because of being rugged, because of being no charge required in the remote areas, so many reasons, you know, and that can contribute in our white paper to make it as colored as possible, gray and black or red or whatever you call it.
Just to kind of reinforce what she's saying and also what you just said, there is a lot of studies done by various NGOs, and this is all there. But the only thing, we all don't get together on one knowledge platform. And I think it's not that I'm trying to beat my drum out here, but I think we need to put it all together. Like take IVRS for instance. I mean, in the year 2002, when we were talking about, I mean, we only had IVRS machine, and the studies were done that nobody pressed beyond 3 buttons. Nobody pressed. And now this studies was collaborated in Africa. And then when the internet became a little bit more stronger, and we thought at that time that internet is going to be the be-all and end-all here, and a similar study was done. And they, you know what, very strange, 2 completely independent studies done in Africa and India. Nobody goes beyond 3 screens. So that means span of attention is the most important thing when we are delivering content. So we need to look, I think the NGOs need to look at the commercial way of selling our development ideas, and I think we need to also change a lot, and I think that should go in.
Just very briefly, on top of what everybody else says, the content, instructional design, I go back to what you say, you know, which is a new mass media in a way. But the characteristic of a mass media so far has been that they've been always easily controlled by the center. So the message was from center out. Now with mobile phone, we actually have an opportunity to revert that and not have a mass of passive receivers, but have a significant number of active users. But to achieve that, we need to think out of the box. I'm still not sure how we can do that, but it would be really a pity if we are going to be using mobile phones just for sending messages and providing content, when the use can be much, much more than that. And I think we need to think out of the box in that respect.
I think I'm just parroting everything that everybody has said, plus this, that I think we need to spend a lot of time observing people in the field and seeing what they do with their tech when they're left alone with it. Because we've found that people innovate in the field quite regularly. We've had people do conference calls and call us on Swara and record an interview, which is 2 people in 2 remote areas conferencing and recording interviews without being physically present. People have figured out how to use numbers to learn English and type in URLs. So there's all sorts of interesting innovation that happens on the field without our knowing it, which needs to come back and go on to things like the open knowledge community, where people can then share it and talk about it and then redo it in their own areas.
So there have been some very interesting things that came out of here. One, of course, is finalizing the white paper with a lot more concrete action that can happen in terms of collaboration. But immediately, one of the things that comes to mind is there is OKC and such platforms, and there is a lot of information that we all have in our heads, in our organizations, related to the use of mobile phones to a large extent. So perhaps as one of the next steps, we can decide how we want to take this forward.
So one of the things that I was just thinking that to go forward to articulate everything on a piece of paper in terms of collaboration and partnership is that what is our baseline to partnership? Our baseline to partnership is UNICEF and DF is on the one side, mostly UNICEF because of this, SBC. But the baseline is these 12 cases, these 12 cases. So let's say if we take these 12 cases all over India or 14 states or wherever in various areas that they are, and we make a matrix of something like that, start putting collaboration in each of those 12 to a scale up or scale down or horizontal or vertical or something like that. And everybody else who contributed in terms of possibility of partnership, So we say that, okay, these are the 12, and we also make another matrix that apart from these 12, there are similar ones which is a smaller branch to that one, which is, let's say video based. So there is, are there more? Maybe, this one doesn't want to go beyond one state or something, but do we have a similar thing, because we are convinced with this video based dissemination on mobile is a very strong idea, and therefore we think about it. Then who can play, what Nokia can play? So we put Nokia's contribution, okay, I can play this role into taking this one, And let's say NASSCOM says that we can talk to so many companies within our membership to see how they can contribute, or so on and so forth. Internet and Mobile Association can do. OKC can say that, okay, we can bring sanity to make sure that there is enough contribution of the community's need or not. So they can organize, let's say 20, 30, 40 community meetings to find out, do they really need video on the mobile or not? So that could be more from the research perspective and from the inputs perspective. So that's what I see as the next step to collaborate, and therefore this is not going to end here. It is going to harass all of you on email, and we won't send mass SMS or not, all that, but lots of emailing and lots of thing. And also one thing that I was also thinking, that for each of these 12 presentation and all the other presentation that took place, we are thinking of devising a set of questionnaire which basically leads us to find appropriate answer to the SBC. That's very, very important, social and behavioral change. And therefore, let's say if you are a case study, then your contribution to those questions could be absolutely concretized in those definition, the SBC definition, rather than all other numbers. And numbers are fine, but how does it really contribute into making more and more, strengthening the SBC definition or explanation, or in a particular area or something like that. So that's the reason yesterday I also requested that all the 12, and now I'm adding those numbers to Nokia and Vodafone and many others, that if they can contribute some of the papers or research which can strengthen the white paper to make it much more robust, because ultimately it is going to help all of us, because we all know that on this topic there is no research paper, there is no reference paper, all the hard numbers are so generic that everybody has those numbers, which is TRAIs or IMAIs or anybody. So we want to make this first contribution also in this sector, because we can do only as much. The whole country is 650 something districts, 250 panchayat. Every panchayat is a small unit of small village in Europe, I'm sure. So this is very important that we try to contribute. So we got together here. And the third area is that, like Sanjay mentioned, and even Alka was mentioning before, that some of the states we can go deeper now. We can organize with a lesser number of case, or different also, maybe localized case studies, and less number of people, but much more going into deeper, as that what we can play a role, and involving the local stakeholder as government, because many of the subjects are state subjects. So even if you keep on hammering here at the central, they will always say that go to the state. We are not the decision maker. Planning commission at the most can write a piece of paper saying that this is a very good idea. But the state government will say, this is great to hear in English, but we have to work on the ground. Yeah. Yeah, they say the Hindi mein baat karo, seedhe numbers batao. Kitne mobile lagane hain, kitne lagne hain. I mean, they talk like that. So how do we involve? Health is also a state subject. Education is a state subject. Most of these are, even panchayat is a state subject for that matter. Go into the deep local level. So that's the broad framework. Am I okay, Alka? So that's the broad matrix that we are thinking that we would make, and we will engage you. So that all the platform, I see from the device perspective, I see Nokia is there to make a lot of contribution. From the telcos perspective, I see that Vodafone should make a lot of contribution. From association, we have NASSCOM and IAMAI. to make a lot of contribution. From the typical ICT perspective, as far as the NGO is concerned, we are there. Even NASCOM Foundation is there. So even if not NASCOM, NASCOM Foundation is there. So, and one thing I forgot to mention, Amitabh is also sitting on some gold mine, which he asked him to share, is that, yeah, he is a member of the governing board of PIR, Public Interest Registry, which owns .org domain. Yeah, so he is on the member of the board, and .org is launching .ngo domain this year, later this year. So every NGO can have the abcd.ngo rather than .org. And they are, I mean, we are working together in the country, and perhaps they have a plan to, when are you going to launch? Mostly in India, I think they're
Upon this is a, you know, as we were speaking about it, in terms of what I'm going to talk about, the idea that came up was in my head. I was trying to link what we do at PIR.org, which is all internet-based stuff. Can you hear me? No. Okay, better. Okay. Give me the right angle. Okay. I think I was trying to connect the dots between what we do as .org and what we have initiated at DEF and other parts of the globe with other NGOs, and this topic that we are on for the last couple of years, which is mobile. And I see that what we are going to do on the .ngo space would really have an impact because of the mobiles, and also mobiles will contribute to what we are going to do a lot. And that is where the NGOs of the world will probably really gain. So let me start from the beginning as to what we are doing, and give me a little time to explain what we are doing. .org, as you know, is the third largest original top-level domain name after .com and .net. Okay, so we have over 10 million .org names, and it's the home for all the non-profits, associations, and such organizations. But it's an open domain, anyone can go and register a .org. But because we are a non-profit, we are the only top-level domain name which is a non-profit organization. Couple of years back, ICANN opened up the domain space to unlimited competition, and they invited applications. As .org, we felt that we also need to do much more than what we have done for the community that we were serving. So we, after a lot of deliberations internally, we pointed out to this community of NGOs. We thought we would do something for them. And we finally came around to deciding on .ngo as a domain that we would apply for. We have been going through the process of applying, and while applying, we had to go through the process of reaching out to the NGOs around the globe. Okay, so we picked up on two partners. One was a consultant based in the US, but big outreach in terms of knowing NGOs in Africa, in Latin America, Europe, and other places. For this part of the region, I contacted Osama, and DF was already doing a lot of work on the NGO front. And we realized that while we were doing all this, we are also realizing the depth of this NGO world and the community around. Okay, worldwide there are about 8 to 9 million NGOs, and India has the distinction of having the largest number of NGOs of any country, 3.3 million NGOs registered in India. So obviously, you know, we focused on India as a market, as a prospective market. And with DF, what we have done is we have reached out to the NGO, the grassroots communities, the NGOs that function in remote areas. We have done about 20 workshops already, and we plan to continue this entire partnership of NGOs with DF. And the result of that would be you have a .ngo domain where any NGO, validated NGO, could become a member. You would get a .org or a .ngo name and will become visible. 80% of the NGOs are not visible on the net today. Okay, and that's one of the reasons where why NGOs are also looked upon as non-transparent, and they have this entire trust issue. So once they come online, and we are going to bring them online. So once we bring them online, and I think we will be launching by about early 2014 is when we see ourselves launching it. We are already working on it. And once we do that, obviously mobile would be a way to propagate NGOs' work to the world and vice versa. And some of the services that we are going to be providing is not just provide a plain vanilla domain name for them. We'll also give them a basket of services which will include payment, online payment facilities, and so many others, you know, email and hosting, which is something that NGOs have always found it difficult to manage for themselves. So that's the partnership that we have engaged in. And as I said initially, it'll have an impact. The mobiles will have a big impact on how NGOs actually get online. and are visible online by the world at large, especially by the funding community and everything else. So their work will become more transparent. So we'll bring in trust, we'll make their work more transparent. So these are the positive fallouts that we're looking at going in the future. So that's how the behavior of NGOs will also probably change, because they know that they are visible now to the people. So that's what it is.
There is another thing that my observation purely, and I don't have data to prove, is that there are 2-3 layers of device working also that I see, is that, you know, at a more data level or functional level is the NGOs level, which were implementers or something of the project, who can go into tablet mode or a data mode or a more smartphone mode, while the user would be more, you know, feature phone or something like that, because they are more delivery of messages are considered, or you know, access to information in a very rudimentary way will happen. This is just my observation, that their device is also going to play a different level of role in terms of its size, in terms of its functionality, in terms of its what it can do. Yeah.
It's interesting that you should point that out. One of the things that we observed when we were trying to do this hyperlocal deployment of IVR servers, one of the things we were thinking is that if you can get an IVR system on an Android phone, every health worker or every frontline worker becomes an IVR system. It's a voicemail box sitting on your machine that can then out broadcast the content coming in. And that really makes it crazy, because you're now not calling an IVR system, which is a depersonalized thing. You're leaving a voicemail for your frontline worker who you know very well. And when that voicemail can be used as content that goes out onto the internet, your volume will go crazy. So that's one of the things we explored, but the problem we ran into is that Android in particular, the cheaper models don't allow you to transfer the PSTN call into a recorder. For the most part, you have to mess with the firmware, and that was not something we wanted to do at that point.
Cool. So any pressing point before we take a leave from Taj Vivanta? Well, thank you very much for your time, patience, and you know, participation. I see it only the beginning of the joint initiative of all of us. This is perhaps the half of the first time that we have met, and we are going to meet several more times, maybe state level, other level. But we are going to come back to all of you on email. We are going to create an email list. Is that right? Yeah, we are going to create an email list, put all of you there. We share all the databases of each other so that we know who all participated, we missed out whom to talk. And plus, of course, going to achieve what we wanted to achieve through online interaction and taking contribution from you. Thank you very much once again.
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. Thank you. Thank you, DEF.